First up, she's a New York Times staff editor and opinion section writer, our good friend Bari Weiss. Hey, you. How are you? Okay. Well, thank you for being here. I know it was not easy. I mean, we've never really had a segment like this where we had a guest on who was recently back from a terrorist attack on their hometown. And when I heard about what happened in Pittsburgh, I know two people from Pittsburgh, my head writer and you. I remember you at the Mets game with your Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yes.
And I first thought, oh, I hope they weren't involved, but what are the chances? Chances were pretty good.
Yeah, it was the synagogue where I was bat mitzvahed. My dad was the leader of one of the congregations that met there for many years, and he personally knew 5 of the 11 innocent people who were murdered.
You did. I read your story today. You talked about people who you saw every week.
I did. I talked about a man named Cecil Rosenthal who was killed along with his brother David Rosenthal. You know, one of the most evil things about the nature of this act is that the murderer killed the most innocent, good, stalwart people in the community. David and Cecil Rosenthal were both intellectually disabled, but they were sort of the unofficial mayors of my neighborhood. My mom went to grade school with them. She was constantly giving them rides to the grocery store, and they were ushers in this community, and they would always sort of stand at the doorway to the sanctuary, which is where they were killed.
So I know a lot of people at a time like this say this is an attack on all religions.
Right, Kellyanne Conway said that.
A lot of people say that. It's a common thing, even on the left. It's a
Right.
thing they say, like, you know, hope,
there's
prayers.
A desire, right? There's a desire to make things, and let's take it from the most well-intentioned place, a desire to sort of universalize things.
And there is attack on all religions at times.
Sure, but this was an attack on Jews.
And that is a specific thing in history that is different.
Right. This was an attack by someone who said that there's a kike manifestation in this country, who hated this particular synagogue because of the incredible values that it stood for. The previous Sabbath, it had been Refugee Shabbat, a celebration of the refugee, which is a profound and deep Jewish value, one that we pride ourselves on. And this is what made this anti-Semitic murderer. That's why he picked this synagogue.
Yes. I mean, this is a guy who didn't like Trump because he wasn't enough of an asshole.
Exactly.
On this issue.
He was too much of a globalist.
But he's definitely heard his message. He definitely heard Trump's message that the invasion is coming. And what I learned recently is that, I think from your article, is that when we heard that chant in Charlottesville, Jews will not replace us, I thought they were talking about a Jew will replace me specifically. There are such conspiracy theorists. They were talking about the fact that Jews will not replace us with the brown people. Mm-hmm. They pulled the strings. They do the hiring. They run the world.
Well, right.
But Jews are going to replace us, not themselves. It's the Mexicans who are going to take your job.
Well, right. What's important to remember is that anti-Semitism is not just a prejudice, it's a conspiracy theory, right? It says that there is a secret hand controlling the world, and that secret hand is called the Jew. So even if Trump himself is not an anti-Semite, and I don't believe that he is an anti-Semite, he is inculcating an atmosphere of conspiracy-minded thinking.
Yeah.
So when he says things like enemies of the people, globalists, you know, we can go on and on. It's been happening every day for 2 years. What, in the mind of people like Richard Spencer and David Duke, they hear Jew, Jew, Jew. And it's not a surprise that people like that were drawn to Trump's banner. Now, you have it on the left, too, where Israel comes to replace Jew as the sort of diabolical controller of all the world's ills, right? But in this case, you know, obviously this person was coming from the political right.
Yeah, they use a lot of those kind of terms like globalist, or they mention international bankers, and they show George Soros, and they show Yellen, and they show people who are Jewish. And I don't think these folks who follow this think too much past that. They want to believe that anyway. And I've never understood really why it is the Jews. Does it go back?
How long do we have on the show, Bill? I mean,
well, I guess it goes back to they think, you know, the killing of the Christ. Is that really where it all comes from?
That's one strand of it. Then there's another strand on the left. I mean, it's
successful. People don't like successful.
Sure.
People.
I mean, the thing that is interesting about it, right, is that typical bigotry. It's that the subject of your bigotry is subhuman. With Jews, they are both inhuman and anti-human at once. They are both physically weak and aggressive. They are both the socialists and the arch capitalists. That is what is so hard about anti-Semitism. I think the thing that, one thing that I'm grateful for this week is that oftentimes Jews, because they are so successful in this country, and we have had incredible freedoms, and it's been sort of a singular experience, the Jewish life in America. People don't realize that Jews are 2% of the population in this country, but they make up half of all hate crimes, according to the FBI. In New York City, half of the hate crimes this past year were perpetrated against Jews.
They're a very small population in the world, only about 15 million or something. I mean, Israel is a very small country. It bothers me, I'm sure it bothers you, that they get so much hate from the left. You know, I've said this before, but I'll repeat it. I don't understand how after World War II, people talked about how the Jews, they just went to their slaughter. They were so weak. And then Israel became strong. They didn't like that either.
Nope.
Maybe it's something with the Jews themselves.
Perhaps.
They don't like.
Israel's the Jew among the nations.
Yes. And they shouldn't apologize for being strong. And sometimes they have to do nasty things that strong countries have to do, like any other country does. But if we went back to free access, we'd go back to pizza parlors blowing up every week.
Right.
If they had a truly free West Bank, I mean, where they didn't involve themselves at all, how long before Hamas, Iran, weapons?
But the problematic thing happening in this moment, right, is that people like Steve Bannon like Israel for the wrong reasons, okay? And we don't
The evangelicals do.
Exactly. So,
because when the world ends,
right,
the Jews convert or die.
Right.
Your choice.
One thing that I think was made stark this week is that there are many Jews, including Jews that I know, who have liked many of Trump's policies regarding Israel and the Middle East. They love the fact that the embassy was moved to Jerusalem, a move that I supported. They like the scuttling of the Iran deal. But I hope this week that American Jews have woken up to the price of that bargain. They have traded policies that they like for the values that have sustained the Jewish people and, frankly, this country for forever. Welcoming the stranger, dignity for all human beings, equality under the law, respect for dissent, love of truth. These are the things that we are losing under this president, and no policy is worth that price.
So that's a pretty good speech to the people of your generation who we worry or may not be voting. I read that 65% of millennials are fearful of the future, and I want to say to them, well, there's something you can do about that.
Do you want our future to be American carnage, or do you want our future to be a renewal of what the founders talked about? We can be the New Jerusalem again. We can renew the tree of liberty. And this week woke me up to that in a way that nothing in the past 2 years ever has. And God forbid it would come to your neighborhood, but when you see people you love going through this, it changes you. And you realize that the way we live in this country, it is an aberration in history. It's a miracle, and it can go away like that. We have the responsibility to protect it, and we need to elect people to Congress and everywhere else on Tuesday that are going to protect those values.
You're so strong for coming here and doing this. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bari Weiss.